Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on Talk Radio AM 640.
I'm the guy to call the Spaceman. This is A View from Space. I'd like to welcome you in if you're driving around town right now listening to AM 640, or if you're at work listening using the AM 640 app, picking up the show there, I welcome you in too. Or if you're listening right now on Shaw Direct on Channel 865, I welcome you in. Or if you're listening on the 3 or 4G personal communication device, your lifeline to the virtual world, by the Stream the World software, I welcome you in too. Or maybe you're what some call the best seat in the house, sitting in front of your Mac or your PC, logged on to 640toronto.com, picking up the live audio streaming there. I welcome you in. Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. Well, hidden secrets of world history. Do you know where we get what we call world history from? Ancient history, starting way back then? We get it from the monasteries. That's right. All things that happened were written down by monks and stored. Monks aren't just Christian. They go back 3,000 years before Christ. They go back to ancient Egypt. And those in control of the religions give you your ancient history, your world history. The Illuminati are setting you up. They are going to follow the King James Version of the Bible to the very letter. Not only did the monks, the priests of the ancient religions record the history, they also recorded who begat who, who's the son of, bloodlines. What I'm really striving for tonight is to expose the well-hidden secrets of world history. Because you've heard of revision history. For instance, the movie put out by Walt Disney a few years ago called Pearl Harbor, shown in Japan, and the Japanese weren't even the real enemy. It's the spin, changing history. It's been done through time. This history is best related starting with the Protestant cathedral and the Catholic Pope. St. Paul's Cathedral in London is built cross-shaped, just like a calendar cross. The calendar cross does not mean religion. The calendar cross is the crossing of the 4 sabbats of the trek of the sun through the year. The original St. Paul's was built in 604 by Ethelbert, who married Bertha, the Merovingian princess of French Merovingian king Charles. The Merovingian Franks built monasteries as a means of infiltration. This bloodline I've just mentioned to you, the Merovingian bloodline, is the one that connects itself with man and God. Its first king, born from a rape of a queen's human mother in the Atlantic Ocean by a sea monster. The first offspring was Merovee, the first of the Merovingian kings, who, It is believed by the Illuminati and the Merovingian bloodline itself that they are indeed part man, part God. This is all of high importance, but nearly no one knows this. The very first Egyptian pharaoh to call himself God was Pharaoh Akhenaten. His temple was cross-shaped, also built for his Brotherhood of the Sun. That's the Rosicrucian history. And the cross there. The cross is an ancient symbol of the sun. The T is represented for Tammuz. Tammuz in Sumerian mythology is a vegetation god representing decay and growth of natural life. He died at midsummer and was rescued from the underworld, supposedly following the spring by his lover, Isis, Ishtar, Astarte. His cult spread over Babylonia, Syria, Phoenicia, Palestine. He was also identified in Egyptian mythology as Horus. You see, the names change in these ancient stories. For instance, Nimrod and his wife Semiramis begat the immaculate son, Tammuz. Ishtar, also named Isis, married Osiris, who Ishtar, Isis, immaculately conceived the reincarnation of this first sun god in Egyptian mystery religion as Tammuz, the one that was resurrected, and the reincarnated Sun King still reigns. See, in ancient Egyptian mythology, the falcon-headed sky god, whose eyes were the sun and the moon, adult son of the principal goddess Isis, or Hathor, as she was also called, otherwise his wife, whom she magically conceived by the dead Osiris, as did Tammuz, was also conceived by Semiramis, wife of Nimrod. He injured his eye while avenging his father's murder by Set. This is Osiris I'm talking about now. And Horus, the good eye being the sun, and the bad represent the moon. Every pharaoh was believed to be his incarnation. And this is what the Illuminati believe, that the latest sun god from this bloodline is now coming into his prime. And the world is being readying, therefore, for this new kingdom that he will possess. They're going to recreate the Osiris myth, the Nimrod myth. See, every pharaoh was believed to be the incarnation of this new god. This next one, and this is why royal bloodlines are so revered by the elite. They believe their certain bloodline is an incarnate of this family bloodline. The next pharaoh was then thought to be the new incarnation of Horus, you see. And in the storyline, in Xenogears role-playing game for Sony PlayStation, Tammuz is actually a big star. It's the name of a country named after the Hebrew month. But in the official English language translation, the name was transliterated Thames, the river Thames in England that flows through London. Yes, that is correct. They are the sun worshippers. That is the home of the Merovingian bloodline as Tammuz, or the Thames, flows through right at the center of London. St. Paul's Cathedral, not cross-shaped until Christopher Wren rebuilt it, by the way, after the fire of 1666 in London. It was designed to be based on its Merovingian past, Oh yes, this is a very calculated, very, very meticulously followed plan, even down to the architecture. Merovingian monasteries became later the Benedictine or the Cistercian. Both designs used the cross design. These were the ones that recorded the history. Wren, one of the greatest architects and member of the Royal Society, of course, and Masonic, was the one chosen. And the crypt of St. Paul's Cathedral, before the fire of 1666, also held the world's largest Masonic library, in case you did not know about that. Something you won't find in history books. Recorded by the monks. Space, back with more. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Tonight, where your ancient history came from, and we'll follow it along tonight. This is AVFS. I'm Space, and I'm just getting started. I'm the guy to call Space. It's a view from space. Emails, the only way I communicate. I got two locations, space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. And as I say every week, because they do, they start rolling in before the show even begins. BT writes, Nimrod, another name for Lucifer, is it not? Do you think that has any connection? Here's a storyline from America Online about the UK and their, waning ability to track nuclear submarines, especially Russian ones. The story is called Nimrod Axe Causes Trident Risk. And yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about with this news story today, actually carrying this ancient history and making it alive and real today. The headline reads, Nimrod Axe Causes Trident Risk. Former service chiefs warn of gap in UK defense. Russian subs are likely to have gathered valuable intelligence on Britain's nuclear deterrent, since the government of Britain, you see, has scrapped the patrol aircraft, and they use the Nimrod fleet for that. Yes, Nimrod is a submarine hunter. And so that story is one of the big ones today. Nimrod still alive. Yes, Nimrod from the family of Cush. Nimrod was black. Ham was the father of the black race. Playing out today still. The black race, Ham, and the white. Just have a look around. It is still here today. St. Paul's Cathedral, as I said before the break, was not cross-shaped until Christopher Wren rebuilt it after the fire, which burnt the first one down in 1666 in London. Joseph, who became second in command to the Pharaoh of Egypt, was the brother of Benjamin, and the Benjaminites make up the largest part of the Merovingian bloodline. We're also a mixture of the Meroites of ancient Egypt. Meroe of ancient Ethiopia or Abyssinia. Some of them were Benjamites also. But there is your very first glimpse at the very first bloodline member of the Merovingians, Merovi. Meroe of ancient Ethiopia in the Abyssinia area. The Philistine giants that they married, the two sons of Joseph, who followed the Benjaminites into exile following God's defeat of the Benjaminites in the book of Judges, the Amalekites, with who God said he would war through the ages, recorded in Exodus 17, verse 16. The Illuminati are going to follow the Bible to the letter. And a lot of the descendants of bitter, rejected firstborns who had become enemies of this God of the King James Version of the Bible, namely the Edomites of the house of Esau and Ishmael, became one through Esau's marriage to Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael. These are the families of the better part of the Red Movement throughout history. They are, are you ready? These two are the ones that split Judaism and Islam, Esau and Ishmael. Families are related. Better part of the Red Movement throughout history, which are going to pit eventually that one religion against the other to demonize all monotheistic religions and replace it with Luciferianism. They're known today as the Brotherhood of the Snake. Yes. Christianity, as well as Judaism and Islam. Its sole purpose was and is to infiltrate and bring about the collapse of the covenants in front of your very eyes, just as recorded in the King James Version of the Bible, of God's two covenants with mankind. Among themselves, they are proud bees, they call themselves. The 9-way reds is another one that they use. Bitter goats of sheepskin is another one. The Great Universal Brotherhood, I call them the Illuminati. And they would become all of those things that I just talked to you about through the passing of the cloak. Huh? Well, it's important to know today that in the early days, saints were made by acclamation of the people or a local bishop. That was until the Middle Ages, and not by the church at all. Macarius of Alexander the Younger, known as the Great Macarius, died in 394 A.D. He practiced occult rituals of body and soul, as was typical of Pharaoh Akhenaten's Brotherhood of the Sun. This was where the first historical Illuminati actually sprang from. These monks fasted for days, starved themselves, tortured their bodies in honor of the sun god, later living as hermits, a word that's actually taken from Hermes, Nimrod's high priest and grand master of the Brotherhood. I'm talking about the Brotherhood of the Snake now. His date of death, March 22nd, 1257 BC, became sacred to the Brotherhood, which is why the Solar Templar and Heaven's Gate's death, if you'll remember back to 1977, took place on March 22nd. And it's why it is a Sabbath to witches and pagans. When Gulf War II started with George W., not George Sr., as President of the United States, it started March 22nd. The death date. You see, it's a very, very important day in around that time, because that is also where, and of course they're sun worshippers, the equinox, the spring equinox. Macarius sets up cells in Egypt, wrote a rule and met with Pachomius of Egypt, an ascetic hermit, and brother of the Brotherhood of the Sun, of course, is the founder of the 9 monasteries. He's the historical founder of Cenobitic monasticism. That's simply the practice of monks living together in a monastery. Pachomius of ancient Egypt was the one that made that rule. Let me tell you that rule. Benedict later made generous use of it. A pestilence wiped out Pachomius and 100 of his monks in 348 A.D. 600 years later, the Nag Hammadi papyrus, Gnostic writings were unearthed near one of the monasteries of Pachomius in Pabao. Q is the designation for this gospel, they say, that no longer exists. Q was never put into the Bible, by the way, by the Roman Catholic Church at the Nicaea Conference, which is where they picked all of the books that would be included into the Bible. In fact, even though no copy of this gospel called Q that they found at Dag Hammadi has survived independently, some 19th century scholars found fragments of such an early Christian composition embedded in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. By putting these two Gospels beside that of Mark, the researchers realized that when Matthew and Luke are telling the story about Jesus, for the most part, they both follow the order and often even the wording of Mark. But into this common narrative outline, Matthew and Luke each insert extra sayings and extra teachings of this one called Jesus. And although Matthew and Luke don't put these sayings in the same order, nevertheless, they each repeat many of the same sayings, sometimes actually even word for word. Since for other reasons it seems unlikely that either Matthew or Luke could have copied from the other, how can this sort of agreement then be explained? The answers appear to be that Matthew and Mark each had two sources in common: the Gospel of Mark and another gospel, now lost. A collection of sayings that they say they have now found, known only as Q. Found it not long ago, 1600 years after Pachomius' death. The Nag Hammadi Papyrus Gnostic writings found. Q stands for Quelle, the German word for source, not the French word what, the German word for source. Although no actual copy of Q has ever been found in its entirety, many scholars are convinced that such a document once circulated in early Christian communities. Since it was difficult to get excited about something that didn't exist, Q remained, just some hypothesis that lingered on the edges of scholarly research by people involved in religious researching. But in 1945, a chance discovery in Egypt provided surprising new evidence that rekindled interest in the possible existence of Q. This is what I mean about archaeological digs. Everyone believes it's a pool of thought you slide into. It's a psychological method of brainwashing people. People slide into that area where they believe, that area of thinking, where they believe if it's dug up out of the earth, it's true. Well, what if somebody buried it there and dug it up and said, look what we found? Couldn't believe that? Oh, you couldn't believe that FIFA was caught bribing people and still would elect their president again either. There are many things that can only be explained partially sometimes in this world. The rest you'll find on a show like this. Space, Bad with More. Talk Radio, AM 640. This is AVFS. I'm going to get a call Space. It's View from Space. Talk Radio, AM 640. Like to email me? Spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Thank you, Bruce, for the one I've received. I really appreciate it. And I get so many, and I'm sorry I can't answer you. That's a full-time job. And I already have one. R.G. writes, history, in my opinion, is often told by the dominant conquerors their way. How true that emailer is. Well, there's no doubt about it. The victor writes history, but he gets the monasteries, his monks, to write it for him. You see, the elites, the Merovingian bloodline, the royal bloodlines, the Holy Grail bloodlines, the Sangreal families are really running this earth and have all minions doing their bidding, especially writing down the history, which is left to the monks to get it, well, right. Yes. Well, let me just take you back to these writings of Nag Hammadi. The digging up of something that they found. Hey, look what we found. Two brothers looking for fertilizer at the base of cliffs in the Egyptian region of Nag Hammadi, where the Nile bends on its way from Chenaboskia to Pabo. Now, as they searched, the brother, one of them, called Muhammad, hid a hard object concealed under the ground. After they removed more and more dirt, brushed it away, proved to be a huge earthen jar, closed with a shallow red dish. At first, Muhammad was afraid to open the jar, lest a jinn might be closed up inside it. You know what a jinn is? An evil spirit. You know, the magic lantern of Aladdin. The genie comes out of the bottle. But finally, he summons the courage to break it, hoping that it might contain gold. Out tumbles, not gold, but 12 books bound in gazelle leather. Okay? 12, the royal number. The perfect number. 12 breaks down to a 3, you see. 1 and 2, 3. 3, the perfect number. The pyramid. Why? Because there is only room for one at the top. That three-sided object. One can only stand, while all others or underneath support that one to be able to stand on top. The perfect magic number. These books would prove to be one of the most important archaeological finds of the 20th century, we understand now. Oh, yes. Yes, look what we've got. This is incredible. The most important archaeological find in the last century. As one of the reasons for their importance is the valuable evidence they provide for the existence of the Sings collection known as simply Q. Remember, standing for the German word Quelle, meaning source. These manuscripts, now known as the Nag Hammadi Library, contain a complete manuscript of the Gospel of Thomas. Yeah, the Doubting Thomas? A fragment of this Gospel, written in Greek, had been found earlier at Oxyrhynchus in Egypt, but it was only a fragment. The next text, found at Nag Hammadi, although complete, was written in Coptic, which was the form of the Egyptian language and used during the late Roman imperial times. Now, on the basis of this text, though, scholars were able to reconstruct the Gospel of Thomas in Greek, the original language of its composition. By this means, they were able to compare its contents with those of writings found in the New Testament. The Gospel of Thomas is very different from the Gospels that have become part of the New Testament. It contains no narrative material, nor is there any story of the birth, the life, or the death of whom the Christians call the Savior of the world, Jesus Christ. It consists only of 114 sayings, in all, each preceded by these words, "And Jesus said." The collection sayings of the Gospel of Thomas are designed by its author as the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke. Some of the sayings from the Gospel of Thomas are very much like those found in the Gospels of Luke, Matthew. For example, Jesus said, "Come to me, for my yoke is easy and my mastery is gentle, and you will find repose." But others are puzzling. Jesus said, "Become passers-by." This is the Nag Hammadi Q Gospel of Thomas. According to this author, salvation is achieved by the recognition of one's origin, the light, one's destiny, the repose. And in order to return to his or her origin, the disciple has to separate from the world by stripping off this fleshy garment that we wear and passing by corruptible human existence. For New Testament scholars, one of the most interesting things about this gospel is that its author, who calls himself Didymus Junus Thomas, appears to have used sayings from the same collection used by Matthew and Luke. But for this author and his community, the meaning of these sayings was clearly very different. The Gospel of Thomas, therefore, provided exciting new evidence, you see, for the existence of an earlier collection of sayings used by a variety of Christian communities. In 1989, a bunch of researchers led by James Robinson of the Institute for Antiquity and Christianity in Claremont, California, in the States, began a most unlikely task, the reconstruction of the Gospel of Q. Oh yes, you know they're going to tackle this. Robinson and his team were accomplished researchers, and what they did is this highly detailed literary analysis of Matthew, Luke, and this new one they found, Thomas. Their work goes verse by verse, word by word, case by case, ending. After nearly 10 years of the work, their efforts, we're told now, are soon to be published as the critical edition of Q. And the recovery of the Q Gospel, you see, has stimulated a debate about the nature, early Christian communities, and by extension the origins of Christianity itself, because that's where the Illuminati are going with these new and exciting information that they've dug up out of archaeology sites. One scholar, Burton Mack, has advanced a radical thesis that at least some Christian communities didn't see Jesus as a Messiah at all. They saw him as a teacher of wisdom, a man who tried to teach others how to live. For them, Jesus was not divine, but fully human. These first followers of Jesus differed from the Christians whose ritual and practice was centered on the death and resurrection of Jesus later. They did not emerge as the winners of history. Maybe because the maintaining of faith required the existence of a story that included not only the life of Jesus, but also his passion. Pachomius passed his cloak to St. Martin of Tours, who then lived in Pannonia. Now the cloak is the symbol of, you wear a police officer's uniform. It's the uniform of the job. The cloak is the uniform of the one controlling history and the writing of it. This cloak went to St. Martin of Tours after Pachomius. St. Martin of Tours lived in Pannonia, the first mainland European home of the Merovingians, originally from Mero, ancient Ethiopia, then a part of ancient Egypt in those days. St. Martin of Tours lived between the years 316 AD and 397, was a son of a pagan. Martin lived as a hermit in Pannonia before even hearing of Christianity. When he received his cloak, Martin then cut his cloak in half and gave half to his poorly clad brother, converting to Christianity. So likewise the first Merovingian king, Childeric, who arrived in Gaul from the same Pannonia, cut a silver coin in half. A little hint for you. The Silver Brotherhood. Originally, silver was in the place where we hold gold today, the most valuable. And went to Ireland. Yes, Childeric arrived in Gaul from Pannonia, cut a silver coin in half, and went to Ireland to become St. Patrick, which is why the world's Masons celebrate St. Patrick Day. And I've got to tell you, Pannonia, the Merovingians, the Silver Brotherhood, and Martin of Tours have everything to do with it. Now, the Bishop of Poitiers, and so founded the great monastic center, Marmoutier, translation bitter grapes, by the way, bitter grapes, sheep actually, and Mar, Hebrew for bitter, Mout, French for grapes, Mouton, French for sheep. Bad name for a holy monastery, don't you think? Bitter grapes, sheep. Martin interviewed many who were surrounded by Pachomius all their lives. And he used the information to save the lives of the heretical Priscillians. And Martin died on the only Masonic feast day on the Roman calendar, November 8th, Feast of the Four Crowned Martyrs, all stonemasons of Pannonia, where he was from, who are really 5, and not by coincidence are confused with 4 other martyr stonemasons, making a total of 9. Remember the 9-way? Space, back with more. Talk Radio AM 640. I'll fill you in on it next. Talk Radio AM 640. I'm the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio AM 640. It's a view from space. I communicate by one way only. It's by email, space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. If you've got a piece of information you'd like to pass along, you have a critique of the show, or you just want to let me know what part of the world you're listening to the show from, feel free. And thank you for the one that you sent me. Before the break, I was talking about, well, Ireland, making the total of 9. And Martin of Tours, founding the Guges Monastery in Gaul in 360, travels to to Ireland, and dies on the only Masonic feast day on the Roman calendar, November 8th, Feast of the Four Crowned Martyrs, all stonemasons of Pannonia, who really were 5, and not by coincidence, confused with 4 other martyr stonemasons, which makes a total of 9. November 8th was and is the last day of the 18-day feast of the resurrection of Osiris. These are the 9 ways. Believers. 9. The number that always returns to itself. The egotistical number. Satan's favorite number. 9. It always returns to itself. 9 times 9 is 81. 8 plus 1 is 9. It just goes on incessantly. And 8. November 8th, last day of the 18-day feast of the resurrection of Osiris, god of the underworld of ancient Egypt. Martin resurrected the infiltration of Gaul begun by Saint Denis. Dionysus, by the way, the much-honored Merovingian saint, so Martin's feast day became November 11th, exactly 3 days later, in imitation of Christ's resurrection 3 days later. The Christ whose church, his monasteries, would successfully infiltrate. Martin passed his cloaks to St. Bridius and John Cassian. St. Benedict of Nursia, Italy. He received the sheepskin cloak of Romanus, a hermit who lived in a monastery in Subiaco. Another Antony of Egypt, Benedict, lived in a cave. Ravens, who are symbols of the Mithra sun worship, by the way, ancient Iranian Zoroastrianism, as well as scorn for women and total opposition of holy orders, are all through his legend. He founded 12 monasteries, and at first crisis abandoned his monks, in all 12, and went alone to found Monte Cassino, which he dedicated to John the Baptist, who later became the patron of Freemasons for this reason, among others. He wrote the Benedictine Rule at Monte Cassino, based on the works of John Cassian and Pachomius, both Egyptian brothers of the sun. As is J.C., by the way. I just want to bring it up to the 21st century. Jay-Z, his latest album, Magna Carta, Holy Grail, it just happens to be his 12th, the Royal Number 3 studio album. Heavy into art, too, and chooses the ancient Merovingian churches in England to showcase his art. The monastery, Monte Cassino, was destroyed 3 times, became appropriately a World War II Nazi fortress. Benedict died March 21st. Equinox, same day as Serapion, Egyptian brother of the sun who received Antony's sheepskin cloak. These are the ones that pass on the information to the next generation. The cloak, the sheepskin cloak of these monks are the head of that order that rewrite history as you learn it in schools. In Mithra, sun god ritual, ravens symbolized the first degree of enlightenment. Benedict's medals tell you a lot. Medals and inscriptions have a gematria of 1998. Now, my resident numerologist, SR, would just love this. The word medals and inscriptions equals 1998 in gematria, which breaks down to a 27, which breaks down to a 9. It's a 9 number, and it will always come up 9s. The 9-way. There's a power, the Illuminati believe, in numerology. Numbers have power. You would learn that right up to date in the latest thing that happened in the Illuminati-controlled mass media last week, and if you were listening to me about David Letterman in his last show with numerology. Benedict also wrote Opus Dei, the common prayer, the crux of this whole rule. Now, today's Opus Dei, the holy mafia or white Freemasonry of the Vatican. Opus Dei's Bible, El Camino, has 999 precepts. That's a 666 turned upside down, reversed. And that really tells you all you need to know about Opus Dei. Beat themselves severely to cause blood to come out of their skin with whips. Opus Dei. Punishment, they believe, self-inflicted punishment, they believe, brings a man closer to God. Well, their God. Columbanus of Ireland received Benedict's cloak. That tells you that the bees of the Red Movement were, by this time, 6th century, very well organized and in Ireland, spreading across, coming westward from the Middle East. Actually, one family member named Columba founded Iona, later condemned by the Roman Church. Columba and his Ionian monks found their way to Gaul during Merovingian rule. And they set up their beehive-shaped stone hermitages off the Isles of Scotland before doing the same in Gaul, which was ancient France in those days, and Germany, parts of Germany, called Gaul. Columbanus passed his cloak to one called Saint Ita. These are your history writers now. Saint Fachan, 6th century, bishop and founder of the Molana Monastery on an island in Blackwater, and later of the monastic school of Ross in Cork in Ireland. What's significant here is the Bishop of Ross became the hereditary Grand Masters of Freemasonry by right of birth. You'll soon see that Merovingian was the right of birth also in this show tonight. St. Brendan, believed to be from Kerry in Ireland, was placed in the care of St. Ita as a baby. He founded many monasteries in Ireland, the most famous, Clonfert. But more than this, he was the first to travel to the New World, then referred to as the Promised Land. Aren't they all? The Merovingians were exiled from the former Promised Land, and ultimate goal of their trek around the Mediterranean was to replace it with another, not God's, as had been what they had before, but their own. Just as the Promised Land of Scripture becomes the new order of things in Revelation 21, verse 5, or the New Jerusalem. So did Merovingians take the same titles? Yes. Most familiar to us now is the New World Order. God versus the new order of things. The account of St. Brendan's journey in the New World was always considered fiction. That is up until the late 70s, here in the last century, 1976, when one Tim Severin, using Brendan's writings, duplicated the voyage in the same kind of a boat and actually ended up in the New World. His conclusion? Brendan's descriptions of Iceland, Greenland, Newfoundland, were supposedly completely and totally accurate. The story goes, Brendan passes his cloak to the New World. He took several with him. Remember that the Merovingians intermarried with Amalekites, with whom God said he would war with through the ages. And isn't it very interesting that for the first Indians of Nova Scotia, as a matter of fact, were named Micmacs, or Amalekites? A history of early Nova Scotia will quickly verify that information for you. Remember also that these early Merovingians intermarried with Philistine giants. And it's interesting, too, that the two giants acquired local fame in the 19th century history of Nova Scotia. Merovingians, men of the vine, Mero, the first one, Vin, vine, Giants, giants. Merovingians, men of the vine of the giants. The bloodline. Space back with more on the Merovingian bloodline, the Benjamite throne of Jerusalem, when I return on Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm the guy they call Space. This is A View from Space. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. I have very small cyber footprint. I communicate by email only at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. I don't spend a lot of time in front of screens. The virtual world being built by the Illuminati. I work in the world of screens. I have to work in it, but as soon as I'm free from work, I'm not looking into a screen. I prefer the real life. Real to virtual. And in the virtual world, the programming is absolutely, well, on steroids. Just a few days, they grabbed you and start pulling your mind into their pools of thought, which are a lot of times illusional, not even happening, but they're making you convinced that it is. The biggest one is the war on terrorism. The Illuminati control both sides and are controlling both sides in this fight also. They're now calling ISIS the most richest terrorist organization in the world. Why? Because the elites funded it. That's why. An unparalleled flow of cash going their way. You can see what's coming in the future. A build-up to what looks like the end of the world and someone arriving to save it. It will be Satan killing Satan, as it always has been through the centuries. And of course, Satan killing Satan saves the world. You're still ended up with Satan running the show. Nothing will change. Only this time, one is coming that will be possessed by this one they call Lucifer, and will rule all the world for a short time. So, knowing that the ultimate Merovingian goal, which is this bloodline that's going to place its family member in this position of this global power, is to reclaim the Benjaminite throne of Jerusalem, taken from them by the God of the King James Version of the Bible and given to the house of David. It is fascinating that Saint Ita, whose cloak Brendan bought to the New World, was given a feast day of January 15th. This cloak, again, remember, are the ones who are writing the history. The monks. Saint Ita brings it to the New World. Given the feast date, January 15th, the exact date that Hebron was given to the Palestinians, the lineal descendants of the Philistine giants. This is, in 1997, by the way, the false Middle East peace process. It was given during the presidency of Benjamin Netanyahu of the New World. The New World negotiator of this peace was Dennis Ross, which brings us back to St. Fakian, founder of the bishopric of Ross and recipient of Ita's other cloak. For behold, an angel, Phakinon, appeared in the Ross Valley to David, St. David of Wales, who was also of royal Merovingian blood. He encouraged him to go to Jerusalem with his two in his household, where the Patriarch of Jerusalem invoked their aid against the Jews, consecrating David, Archbishop. Glastonbury, Her Saints, 1929, published. Page 27, it wrote, like Benedict, David first founded exactly 12 monasteries in Wales, the rule of which was based on the strict self-denial of Egyptian monks. Then David truly entered Merovingian history by building on to the old Glastonbury church, said to have been built by the Joseph of Arimathea personage, who donated a tomb for the burial of Jesus. Let it be known that Glastonbury is sacred to Freemasonry, to Merovingians, to Benedictines, to Cistercians, then pro-Merovingian, to witches, to pagans, then and now, to the occult world in general, and that is sacred to all of them because it is their belief that beneath Glastonbury Tor, just a word meaning hill, is the entrance to hell. Hell had a role in the composition of the legends of Glastonbury, you see. Its entire poorly recorded history, of course, by monks, is based on an MS, written by St. David's uncle, on writings of French Lyrinians of the 9th century, on Cistercian legends, who were also like-minded with the Merovingians, and on altered works of William of Malmesbury, who wrote the Merovingian lies of history, including the legends of St. Patrick, the legend of King Arthur, both invented by the Merovingians as a means to an end, their ultimate conquest of the world. Because you see, a King Arthur is going to come and rule over Camelot. Yes. Camelot will be the new world order. And the King Arthur that comes will be of this bloodline with King Arthur in his lineage. The French Merovingian succession rights fell under the Merovingian Treaty of Andelot, which was corrupted to Camelot in the Arthurian legends. The lost Merovingian king, Dagobert II, lance through the eye killed, became characterized as Lancelot, the first Merovingian king. Clovis was so named by his father Childeric, who is the real St. Patrick, by the way, in honor of the three-leaf clover associated with the Trinity legend he had created around St. Patrick. Yeah, it's not about luck. It's about who writes history. Childeric was a Lyrinian patrician from the Patrick was derived. He simply went to Britain with the unusual Egyptian hermits to establish Merovingian monasteries with their agenda during the years he was banished from France for his sexual promiscuity. Childeric was the prankster who cut a coin in half and left half with his friend Wheelmad until his return. The basis of the return of the once and future king. That's what they say about King Arthur. The title was then passed to his son Clovis, who I believe was King Arthur. Well, they didn't call him that. They just do today. But I believe the King Arthur life, as we know it, was in fact actually the Merovingian King Clovis. Childeric was crossed from Boulogne-sur-Mer, and the town now boasts that St. Patrick's once lived here. Godfrey de Bouillon, the one who led the attack on the Muslims for the very first crusade in Jerusalem, is also found in Boulogne-sur-Mer. And Godfrey de Bouillon was the first Merovingian, yes, he was of course of the Merovingian bloodline, to reclaim the Benjaminite throne of Jerusalem during the Merovingian-inspired crusades, making him the King of Jerusalem. A Merovingian, Godfrey de Bouillon, through the First Crusade. By the time Childeric's son, and by the way, before I move on, the Crusades are still continuing today. We're gearing up for, you guess which ready? Are you ready? Guess which number crusade it will be. There have been 20. This next crusade, which I believe is going to bring World War III to the Middle East. This next one, this third one, on the horizon. as the Merovingians are about to grab a hold. The 21st Crusade to once and for all, finally, take back the land they were kicked out of. This is the land of Canaan I'm talking about. The Merovingian bloodline finds itself coming out of the bloodline of Cain. Space back with more. Flip side of this break on Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm the guy to call Space. It's a view from space. That's all it is. Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Thanks for the one you've sent. DJ writes, hi, Space. Saying hi from the Welsh Valleys. Love the show. Well, I'm talking a little bit about that area here in tonight's show. And no matter where you live, as a matter of fact, in this world, sooner or later, wherever you live, I'll be talking about your area. It inevitably will come up. Now, Godfrey de Bouillon, as I said before, led the very first crusade. The Merovingian-inspired crusades, by the way. And he was a Merovingian, living around that area where the EU's got its seat of power right now, Belgium area. That's where Godfrey de Bouillon and his family were from. That very, very high elite aristocratic area of the EU. Anyway, de Bouillon reclaimed the Benjaminite throne of Jerusalem for the first time during the Merovingian-inspired crusades. By the time Childeric's son, Clovis, ascended as first Merovingian king of France, Childeric had already laid the foundation of an English kingdom, and Clovis, in his quests to conquer that kingdom, became King Arthur, prancing to Britain for a rendezvous with hermits who were preparing his conquests in advance. The Druids, the monks, the religious order that were writing history and making sure this Merovingian bloodline survived and was atop all. The lifespans of Childeric, Clovis parallel exactly that with St. Patrick and King Arthur. They do. Joseph was then added to the legend. Oh, yes, throw in the bloodline of the house of David because they need it to claim that they are the Messiah. Must come from the house of David, you see. The Merovingians can claim that. Joseph was then added to the legend that he came to France with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus in the town of Magdala. Mary Magdala's last name, right? Because you know the Merovingian story. Mary Magdalene married Jesus Christ. They escaped the cross, moved to France, and had children. And those children became the crowned heads, the royal families of all of Europe. Merovingians had already started with the myth that Mary Magdalene was the sinful Mary of Scripture, who they adopted to pit against the sinless Mary, signing their Mary, the rose and the cross. The symbol of the ancient brotherhood of the sun, by the way. The rose, supposedly standing for royalty, and the cross for sun worship. Merovingians claim to be offspring of the union of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, as I just spoke, and a heresy of the first order, outright lies, but we have now been conditioned to think of the fallen woman the moment we hear the name Mary Magdalene. This was one of the many Merovingian victories and the propaganda battle to establish this lie, Mary Magdalene marrying Jesus Christ and having children, as truth. As a result, Mary Magdalene has not received her rightful place in honor in history, the honor which Christ himself gave her by choosing her as the first to see his risen body, is how the King James Version of the Bible describes it. Likewise with Joseph of Arimathea, his uncle, served their purpose in that they claimed that he Joseph of Arimathea bought the blood, sweat, and grail of Jesus, and placing these at Glastonbury, the entrance to hell, was a perfect strike at the Roman Catholic Church by the Merovingian bloodline that eventually took over the Catholic Church. Joseph of Arimathea, Glastonbury, was the birthplace of Christianity in Britain. So legend tells it's the place where the first church was built, just 30 years after Jesus was crucified, when Joseph of Arimathea supposedly arrives in Glastonbury in 663 A.D. On the shores of Glastonbury Island, Joseph lands with 11 followers and 2 cruets containing the sweat and blood of Jesus Christ, we're told. Joseph had been sent to evangelize the Brits by Jesus' disciple Philip, who had just converted Gaul, then France, parts of Germany. Below the Tor, Glastonbury Hill, Joseph and his followers land and stop to pray. He stands, thrusts his staff into the earth of Weary All Hill, so called because they were all weary, you see, from their long ordeal of traveling. And famously, his staff, Joseph of Arimathea's staff, takes roots and begins to bud in the ground overnight. A Christmas blooming thorn tree grew from that spot, we're told, by the morning, and Joseph declares that they had found their journey's end. He builds an ancient wattled church, the Vetusta Ecclesia, at the very place where he had knelt to pray, we're told. Joseph, the uncle of Jesus Christ, decreed that 12 monks should always reside in that most sacred place. Yes, 12, the royal number. Jesus appeared to Joseph and his followers. Jesus blessed Britain's first church, dedicates it to his mother Mary, and after some years, Joseph dies, buried by his followers on a 2-forked line next to the ancient church. Joseph's legend has a lot of variations. One tells that the archangel Gabriel actually told Joseph to build the church, and local legend at around Glastonbury insists that Joseph brought the young Jesus to Glastonbury on a trading trip for Mendip lead, as Blake's famous Jerusalem poem recounts, used, by the way, in the opening of the ceremonies of the 2012 Olympics in London. Most remarkable is the legend that Joseph found the church already built by Jesus himself in honor of Mary. The church becomes Britain's most sacred Christian site. The Grail, for centuries, Joseph of Arimathea's sweat that he had brought to Glastonbury from Palestine. As Joseph's fame and cult grew through the medieval era, so the story of the cruets, the cups, merged with Celtic-ness of a magic and a life-renewing cauldron to produce the great legend of the Holy Grail. That story grew that Joseph came to Glastonbury bearing this Holy Grail, this cup, this sacred chalice, supposedly used by Christ in the Last Supper, that Pontius Pilate gave him, and in which he collected drops of the wounded Christ's blood. Miraculously, the blood survives Joseph's long journey. Before he dies, Joseph buried the Holy Grail somewhere in Glastonbury, it's said, like King Arthur, to appear again one day. Believe me, they're going to make it appear. So in Glastonbury's landscape began the great Grail quest, in which the hero knights of the Round Table search for this life-renewing Grail, this Holy Grail. In modern myth, the Grail quest is mirrored in the Glastonbury Zodiac. Now, among their secret code words, blue apples stood for Glastonbury in Avalon, which name translates place of the apples. But the grail they placed there was not the cup of Jesus, but rather the silver cup of Joseph, the brother of Benjamin, a cup used by Joseph for divination and passed to Benjamin. Recorded, free to read, King James Version of the Bible, Genesis 44, verses 5 through 17. His only brother of Rachel, Benjamin. Benjamin was named Benoni, meaning sorrowful, at his birth. So Arthurian knights adopted tear-shaped shields, and sorrowful became the code word and a goal. Like most Merovingian monasteries, Glastonbury became a Benedictine monastery. Controlled by this bloodline, this supposed religious sect, the Benedictine monks, and the purpose of Merovingian monasteries was infiltration, based on the belief that the best way to crush the church was from within. And I believe they've done a great job of it. Wouldn't you? According to Butler, the world's authority on saints, neither Bede, Gildas, Nennius, Geoffrey of Monmouth, the authentic William of Malmesbury, nor any other chronicler for 1,100 years do we find any trace whatsoever of the supposed coming of Joseph of Arimathea to Glastonbury. Butler's Lives, Volume 1, Butler states this, that a book which chronicles the supposed coming of Joseph to Glastonbury was penned by another hand a century later and prefixed to Malmesbury's The Antiquity of Glastonbury Church. So there is no doubt that this would have been the work of the Cistercians, founded by the Benedictine monks as the ratchet for the structural organization of Sion. Only Joseph of Arimathea is associated with that Grail legend and the quest of the Grail legends. That's why Collier's Encyclopedia is dominated by the mystical symbolism of the Cistercians. Illustrations that give triangular geometry, the pyramid, and double-headed trees. Both Patrick and Joseph of Arimathea were assigned the same feast days, by the way, March 17th. Well, it's St. Patrick's Day. We got a call space. It's a view from space on Talk Radio, AM 640. The monasteries, the monks, the Cistercians, the Benedictine monks are the ones that write the history. In the ancient times, that's where we get it from. I'm revealing some of the lies and dissecting some of it. This is a very interesting email from WK. He states, Bob Dylan did an album called The Tempest. There's also a play was written, attributed to William Shakespeare, the same title. I believe they have Megaphilippus in mind. He states, the London Olympics theme music at their opening ceremony was composed by Mike Oldfield, whose name means, who is like ancient earth. He also composed music that was used in The Exorcist, that's Tubular Bells. Back in the 70s, he did an album called Tubular Bells, all of which harkens back to the story of Cain. Cain, originally spelt with the, are you ready? As I was talking about those Nag Hammadi scriptures dug up, starts with Q, A-Y-I-N, Cain. Cain, whose name also means envy, which is heated with passions, like cayenne pepper is heated. Heat is always associated with Cain, whose occupation was a miner, my emailer states, not a farmer. How so? He states, in the process, Genesis 4:3, and in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. The ground, my emailer states, does not reproduce. Plants do, herbs do, animals and creatures do, as also do the trees. Genesis 1:11. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth, next line, and the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after its kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after its kind. And God saw that it was all good. See, the ground, my emailer is trying to state, is does not reproduce. Plants do. And he's just proven it. Now, Cain. The fruit that Cain produced was from ore, he believes, smelted, alloyed, forged, and cast into molten images. He brought idols, the works of his own hands. Cain was a miner, a metallurgist, a magician, a blacksmith, a forger, an idol manufacturer. Sounds to me like the elites in our world today, doesn't it? Well, it is. Cain's domain was of secrets, of black magic, of alchemy, of idols. Case closed, right? In Romans 1:20 through 2:10, you see the character of a magician alchemist compared to that of Jesus Christ, say, for instance, who's likened to a farmer that waits patiently for the earth to produce the crop he had sown. My emailer finally closes with this. Consider that Cain produced Jubal, and Tubal-Cain, which the last name Tubal-Cain means Baal-Cain, Baal, as in the temple of Baal, Baphomet, Satan, Lucifer, and more familiar to us, the word Vulcan, which we get the word volcano, which happen to be just everywhere around in the world right now with the earthquakes. Do you notice that? As the earth, it seems, is sort of like, as the King James Version of the Bible states, in the last days, would be a very, very, very volatile area with all kinds of earthquakes and volcanoes. Well, the Illuminati are producing them. Tubes are made as metal cylinders, right? Tubal-Cain, which gases pass through cylinders. Bells are the flares at the ends of tubes made to either trumpet or funnel gases, liquids, or grains. Jubal was associated with brass musical instruments and made the horns look like that. Jubal with weaponry and technology. And the archetype of ball and chain is a metaphor for creative power, as is a piston shaft and compression chamber. A sphere, again. That's a great email from WK. Now, there are so many things that the Illuminati are purporting as truth, which are lies just like this, because they only lie. The best possible evidence I could have of that is the whole FIFA affair of this past week. Enough said. Now there's more proof even. Proof of St. Martin of Tours' involvement in this Merovingian conspiracy. Now, the Red Cross on the white field shield claimed as that of Joseph rests in a Cistercian monastery today. Patrick, too, was assigned a Red Cross on a white field. Both are exactly like that of the garb of the Crusaders, right? Both Patrick, one of the 9 hostages, remember, and Joseph are shrouded in legend with contradictory history and no documentary evidence at all whatsoever from any British contemporaries of that day. Silence always speaks louder than words, but not in this case, because since when do Freemasons celebrate Catholic saints? All their public hype over St. Patrick does say it all. And if you ever go to their special secret celebrations, you'll find them acting out a play on Joseph of Arimathea, as a matter of fact. You can find copies of this. You'll find them acting out a play of Joseph Arimathea. Amongst Masonic literature, it's in an old book written in 1925 called Glastonbury, Her Saints Inside. And C.L. Lewis, the writer, Vicar of Glastonbury, writes on page 13, as a matter of fact, that the Illuminati number, that another hand imposed on William of Malmesbury's work, and in the same sentence, some interesting legend on St. Patrick. There's more proof of St. Martin's of Tours' involvement in this Merovingian conspiracy, as I was saying. It happens that according to Butler's Illustrated Abridged Lives of the Saints, the remains of Joseph of Arimathea are actually said to be buried in Marmoutier, founded by Martin of Tours. Then connecting us again to Sion. Martin of Tours' biography was written by Sulpicius, Saint Sulpicius, of 2nd Bishop of Bourges, who is known through a single Merovingian document which supplies very little detail but emphasizes his care of the poor. He died on the Feast of Anthony. That's January 17th, which feast he shares. Saint Sulpicius, Bishop of Bourges, from 1584 until his death, was born into a wealthy family and an illustrious Roman family. He was highly knowledgeable in secular literature and in law, and he practiced for a time being a lawyer. Now, he also began to consider the religious life following the death of his wife, from whom he inherited even greater wealth, because you see, the elite only marry the elite to keep the power. For a time he continued to live in the same household as his pious mother-in-law, Basula, who he shared a mutual affection with, as a matter of fact. Her example and exhortations confirmed the resolution of St. Sulpicius to turn his life over to Christ unreservedly. Or did he? The conspiracy thickens when you uncover the knowledge that the Merovingian Sion regularly held meetings at this center in Paris. The Prière de Sion was named after the Swiss town Sion, near Geneva, where the Merovingian kings keep their treasure, or, well, I still believe the Merovingian bloodline still keeps their treasure in Switzerland. I believe it's there where all the money is. After the Reformation, Geneva becomes known as the Protestant Rome, and the city where world leaders would meet for one thing, and one thing only when they did meet there, for peace. Just as it's always been going on. As I say, the Merovingians hold this place that holds their money at a very, very high esteem. Switzerland, the home of the Illuminati. The Reformation was contrived by the Prière de Sion, funded by their powerful organization, the Knights of the Templar. Sion itself is a Merovingian front organization. Christianity has no effect on the Merovingians. They're involved in assassination, patricide, murder of their own father, their own kids, fratricide, their own sister, their own children, torture, mutilation, treachery, adultery, incest. Chilperic, we're told, ordered every joint of Siglia, the Goth, to be burned with white-hot irons, and each limb to be torn from its socket. Wood's work and Merovingian Kingdoms is the name of the book, informs us that the first Merovingian king, Clovis, had to deal with the Catholic hierarchy, but remained pagan, as all Merovingians did, including the ones in Windsor Castle today. I'm Space. Back with more on the other side of this break at Talk Radio AM 640. I communicate by email only, spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. This is A View from Space. I'm the Spaceman. This is a show about lies. Basically, tonight, how history is lying to you on what happened in the past, because the victors are the ones who write the history, and they're writing our future in these, well, parables they slip into the Bible that is going to be the blueprint for them to follow, to fool the world into believing the world is coming to an end, doomsday is about to come, and the Savior is about to save the world. And they have it planned just that way. The Merovingian bloodline are going to one day put their family member, their latest surviving family member, atop the pyramid of this great global governance that's coming. But first, consternation and all manner of hell must break loose before we will accept this. And so be it. The Merovingians of France launched the Fair of Saint-Denis from their cathedrals, because the cathedrals are the ones that keep these great ancient bloodlines in power. They write the history. The fair was known as the Lendit Fair. It lasted an entire month of October. The main beam, by the way, of the calendar cross, because the calendar cross is nothing to do with Christianity whatsoever. It is the 4 Sabbats and the cycle of the sun in a year. They're called cross-quarter days, and there are 4. During which time the church heavily mocked. Fairs were bringing commerce to places, just as they do today. And this was the time of the Crusades. At first, the Crusades were interested mainly in reaching their goal of Jerusalem, but settlement and exchange of goods, business, soon loomed large in their minds too. That's why this coming New World Order after this 21st Crusade is finally complete. There will be an exchange of goods, and there will be great business done on this world, and it will be all belonging to one corporation. That's their message, one. The Crusades gave the growth of towns and trade further impetus too, and after the Crusades, trade and towns expand, some simultaneously, to forever change the social and physical landscape of Europe. So the Merovingian Christ, the Masonic Christ, the Antichrist, not the Christian Christ, ordained for God's people, continued. When Britain took the New World from the French, they made Halifax, Nova Scotia, their fortress city. There they built another St. Paul's Church, where the local Masons got together and plotted ways to rid the city of the Roman Catholics. The church was actually built on pi 1.618 formula, as were all Masonic churches ordained by Merovingians, including Notre Dame of Paris, one of their Catholic accomplishments. And in the same exact year, Jesus' mother Mary supposedly visits Fatima in 1917. The Virgin Mary appears to 3 children, if you'll recall: Lucia, Jacinta, and Francisco, in the tiny village of Fatima, Portugal. Remember? The story goes, she told the children that if man did not stop offending God, a great war would begin during the reign of Pope Pius XI. 22 years later, World War II breaks out in Europe. In fact, it was just 54 days after that event occurred that the Halifax explosion in that harbor took place, which killed 1,963 people. It was planned by the same Masonic organization who are responsible for the assassination of the only Catholic American president, John Kennedy, at 63. Did you notice the 63 deaths and the